Hello and welcome to a brand new edition of Film Watch, the show that doesn't tell you what to think, but simply says what's on in the cinema. I'm Josh Rom and today's film is A Haunting in Venice, directed by Sir Kenneth Branagh, of course synonymous for playing Hercule Poirot, of course that famous character by Agatha Christie. And joining me on the sofa to discuss all of this is the Sun Showbiz reporter Callum Wells.
Hercule Poirot, I've found something. I've looked at it from every which way. I am the smartest person I ever met, and I can't figure it out, so I came to the second.
You are up to something, my friend.
I've seen a million of these so-called psychics, each one a fake.
I do not believe in psychics.
Come with me to a seance. Spot the con I can't.
Detective, you are here to discredit me, but I can talk to the dead.
Wells.
Thank you for having me, Josh. My first time on the show.
Yes, and honestly, we have got a lot to talk about.
Yes, we do.
So the film we're reviewing today is A Haunting in Venice. Of course, this is directed by Kenneth Branagh. He stars in the film's lead role as Hercule Poirot, of course, the famous detective made, of course, synonymous with Agatha Christie. First thoughts on the film?
Well, I didn't like it. I know you liked it more than me. I think you give it, was it 3.5 stars?
Yeah, I was going to say, first kind of review.
I'd go for 2. Sorry. I didn't really like it that much. I found it really boring. I mean, it's called A Haunting in Venice. I was expecting Venice, scenery, picturesque backdrops, and it was all at night. It was the first 5 minutes you had Venice.
And of course
and then
you had
for
it
the
at
rest
the end as well.
At the end, well, I actually walked out 20 minutes before the end.
Oh,
but yeah, I just found it quite
sign.
boring. I found it very boring.
Because the thing is, I will say, you know, I watched obviously Murder on the Orient Express and of course Death on the Nile. I think this film had a very particular feel to it. It was very different from the first 2 films before. This was, I think it felt a lot darker than the previous films before.
Yes.
You know, you say that you wanted to see these gorgeous pictures of Venice, but actually, I thought that the dark setting, I thought it was still very synonymous with Venice. I thought, you know, the scene being set in this kind of palazzo, it was a very unique setting. Of course, there was all the scenes in the basement and all the water and the flooding. And actually, I'm not going to give anything away when it comes to the story, but there is an element, especially when it comes to the canals in Venice. So I think it was a very quintessentially, it was a quintessential story that is set in Venice. I just think it was quite a detachment from the previous 2 films. What do you think?
I was hoping to see, as I say, beautiful Venice backdrops, and we were stuck in a basement in the pitch black for a lot of it.
It was more of a palazzo. It wasn't quite just a basement. The basement did, of course, feature very heavily in the film, and there was a very, you know, useful plot when it came to it, and almost a subplot. But let's talk about the rest.
I wasn't engaged. I wanted to be engaged, and I wasn't.
I think the thing is, you know, the first 2 films, Murder on the Orient Express and of course A Death on the Nile, they're very. You knew that it was murder mystery, but I think here there was such a mixture of genres here. I thought it had its really quite scary moments. I think it wasn't just a murder mystery thriller. I think they very much kind of used elements of horror in the production as well, and I thought that gave it a very kind of unique feel to the film. Did you like the kind of inclusion of horror?
I like horror. I think I was surprised it was a 12A actually. I was expecting it to actually be a 15 at least. I thought it maybe was a 15 as I was watching it. Then I checked and it's a 12A. And you compare that to The Haunted Mansion, a Disney film, which we went to see recently. And that was a 12A. And that had a very, very different feel to it, right?
Yeah, because I was actually going to say, with you know, we're going to compare Haunting in Venice with A Haunted Mansion, and actually you say Disney, this is also 20th century, it's also a Disney film, so, you know, Disney have released these 2 kind of seemingly scary films. I don't think The Haunted Mansion was scary at all, in a short space of time, and both of them before Halloween. Do you think this is a mistake?
Probably should have waited for at least one of them to be released around Halloween. I think I think now was the wrong time. I think if they'd released it around the Halloween time, I think you would have had more people going along to it. Because everyone wants to go and see a horror or at least something a little bit scary. I'm not saying the Haunted Mansion was scary, but it definitely had those elements around it.
I think the Haunted Mansion definitely felt much more juvenile when you compare it to A Haunting in Venice.
It was a family film.
It was a family film, and you could...
and more of a PG, actually, than a 12A.
I mean, it's one of those things where I actually don't know. And I don't think the Haunted Mansion knew what sort of audience it was aiming for, because adults I don't think would find it scary enough. I think little kids would find, and I'm talking very little, kind of like the age of 4, 5 and 6 that would go to see the Haunted Mansion, I think they would find it too scary.
Really?
I don't. And
Haunting in Venice was scary in parts. A Haunted Mansion.
No, that's
I didn't find any of it scary.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. We as adults wouldn't find the Haunted Mansion scary, but I think
I don't even think kids would find that scary.
I think little kids would find it too dark.
Okay,
I think they'd find it too dark. But then at the same time, I don't think it's the sort of film that teenagers would want to see, because it appears too juvenile.
Yeah.
Whereas I think A Haunting in Venice, I think that film is aimed specifically at an older audience. Would you agree?
I would agree, and I don't think you were even that big a fan of A Haunting in Venice, because you gave it 3.5 stars. If you really loved it, you would have given it 4.5 or 5, right?
I mean, my problems with it is I think some of the storytelling was a little too slow. I think that murder mysteries in past, Agatha Christie murder mysteries, are such well-written pieces, but I think this was just a little too hard to figure out, and especially because there were kind of all these other red herrings. There's always going to be a red herring at the side of, you know, the main story, and I think the red herrings here were a little too erroneous to the plot. I think, especially when it came to Tina Fey's character, you know, I want to actually go on to the casting a little bit, because of course we had Sir Kenneth Branagh as Hercule Poirot. He both directed the film and also starred in it, and that of course has its own challenges. But when you look at the rest of the cast, I think Camille Cotton is really starting to show her mettle as an actress. But then there's this kind of number 2 character, not so much the sidekick, but kind of as Poirot's equal. You had Tina Fey, and I think this was a very mismatched actress to this performance, because of course
she's a comedian.
We all know Tina Fey for Saturday Night Live, Mean Girls, but here you had her in a part which advanced the plot. But I almost found there wasn't that much substance to it. I thought it was almost a very superficial performance, and you know, her talents weren't really shown to their optimum effect. What did you think?
Who would you have cast in her role instead?
I might have cast somebody a bit more like Cate Blanchett that could maybe play to the more mysterious elements, more of the horror elements, especially we saw her in Tar quite recently. That was quite a harrowing performance, so I would have cast that. But also I thought Michelle Yeoh was criminally underused in this.
We can't give away what happens, Josh. We won't give
away what happens, but I thought she was criminally underused. You know, an Academy Award-winning talent like Michelle Yeoh deserves more substantive parts, and I just don't. We didn't get that here. It was almost it was almost a teaser, and then she was taken away from us. Would you agree?
I agree. She should have been used more, and she wasn't. So that was a mistake, definitely.
So, on balance, do you think this film will be good for Disney, especially because they need big releases right now? Of course, Hollywood is at a standstill. They can't produce anything. Yes, the writers have agreed a tentative deal, so to speak, but the actors have not yet returned, so Hollywood and the studios need films to release. Do you think this will serve Disney well?
Do I think it will serve Disney well? I don't think it's going to go down as one of their greatest films in history. I think the previous 2 Poirot movies were definitely stronger, especially Death on the Nile. I really loved that one. I don't think it's going to go down as one of their best, no.
I mean, when it comes to this franchise, it's funny that you say the other 2 were stronger. I actually think this lands far better than the first 2 films. I think.
Why do you think so?
Because Murder on the Orient Express is absolutely iconic, as is Death on the Nile. Both of them had previous film iterations, so naturally people are going to compare the previous two films with past iterations. You know, when I think of Death on the Nile, I think of Dame Maggie Smith. You know, I think of that... I think of that absolute iconic portrayal, and I don't think either film lived up to the expectations. However, saying that, A Haunting in Venice, it's actually based on a different story, Halloween Party. And because this iteration of Hercule Poirot was not so well highly publicised, it's not so well known in the public zeitgeist, I actually think people won't know what to expect, especially with its kind of detachment, kind of bringing in those horror elements. I actually think that this was a different route to go down with the franchise, and I actually think if Disney are to make more films, I think we could see far more darker elements being brought into these murder mysteries.
I always welcome darker elements. I just think I got lost in, I mean, there were so many subplots, and there were too many twists and turns. It just wasn't something that captivated me. I found it hard to follow, and it's not one that I would watch again.
I did think it had a satisfying ending, though. And I think
I didn't stay until the ending, so I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know.
Mr. Critic over here.
If I'm not enjoying something, I don't stay. If I'm not enjoying it, I don't stay in the cinema.
Well, listen.
I'm not afraid to walk out. Have you ever walked out of cinema before?
I'm actually trying to think.
I walked out of Barbie.
I actually don't know. I haven't walked out of any sort of film, because even if I'm not enjoying it, it's more of a case of I just cover my eyes, I hide. I very much enjoy the cinema experience. I think the cinema experience is sacred. But what I think we should say to Disney here, I almost think there is an element of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. In this instance, it's Josh Rom and the three movies. We've got a movie in Haunted Mansion, which wasn't scary enough. We've got A Haunting in Venice, which is too scary. Disney, we need your next film to be just right. What do you think?
I agree, Josh. Yes.
Well, that's what Callum wants to say. Final film rating for you?
Final film rating, maybe 2.5. Maybe I can push it ever so slightly. 2.5 out of 5, so we're halfway there. Is that better?
I think that's
okay.
That'll do well. I am 3.5, and that's all we've got time for today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Film Watch. Please comment below. We want to hear from you. Callum didn't like the film. I thought it had its merits, but effectively, we want to hear from you. We want to hear what you have to say. And of course, keep up to date with the Sun Showbiz for all the latest news and developments in the TV and showbiz world. And if you liked what you see, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. See you next time.
See you.